Hey, what's up guys, my name is Cherno. Welcome back to another live stream, another engine game series episode. Yeah, today we're going to continue on with C# scripting, as always, because that's what we do now, that's all we do now. I actually want to kind of maybe take a look at the roadmap a little bit, just to see like how we're doing, because it's been a little bit since we looked at it. And by a little bit, I literally mean a little bit. It's been like 2 episodes since we looked at it. Vague Lobster, thank you for being the best tier 2 sub I've ever had for 26 months. 26 months of subscribing. Appreciate the support. Mori2, thanks for the Prime sub as well. Roadmap. So, C# fields. We can now serialize fields, actually. That's what we did last episode. For those of you watching on YouTube, I might link the episode up there. Probably won't, though. But you can look at the playlist and the channel. Reload C# assembly is one of the major features we still need to do. I think I was reading, I think the Game Engine series, here we go. I was reading the Discord, in the Game Engine series channel of Discord, and someone said, Taurus Dev said, I wonder what's next for C#. I do hope it's using get component for C# classes. Which reminded me of that because we haven't done that yet. And I'm assuming what they mean is... Let's open up the sandbox guy as well. Which is where, like here. No, it's in Hazelnut. Yeah, it's in here. Which is basically... being able to, like... You know, instead of just get component, right? If we had, like, for example, some other entity here, or we did something like find entity, which we don't even have. But let's just say we have a find entity by name, and we could, like, from here we could get the camera. Being able to, like, use that as the actual camera script class, right? So that we can get that, we can actually get that script class attached to a particular entity. So we can't do that at the moment, and we probably should investigate that. So, I don't know what to call that. Getting script component class in C#. And we'll probably, I don't know, we'll probably do that today. And I also want to maybe take a look at you know, stuff like this, like find entity by name, for example, and potentially, I don't know, like I do want to make it so that we can just set entities as well. Like that should definitely be possible, but we'll have to take a look and see what's up. Echo, thank you for the sub. Appreciate the support. Thanks guys for the hype train. Yeah, so that's kind of the plan. So where do we begin? Well, let's kind of, you know what, I've written the code out pretty much perfectly. Let's make this work. This is going to be our little scenario for today. At the moment, if we hit play on like our, what is this, like the physics 2D scene, you know, we can move our player with the WASD keys like this, right? However, if the player goes like off the screen, like that's it, right? The camera doesn't follow the player. So let's make it so that the camera actually follows the player. And of course, we're not going to do that by like parenting it or whatever. We don't even have parenting yet. We're just gonna actually like maybe get the camera. How about this? This will be a more realistic example. Let's get the camera to, we'll just do it straight away. We'll just do it in an update for now. We'll just get like ultimately, let's do this, even though we don't have to do it this way. Player pet player equals find entity by name player dot as player. Because alternatively we could just do this, because what we're gonna do from that is we're gonna basically just get the translation, and we're gonna get like the XZ translation or whatever, or the XY translation, and then set that to be our translation XY, right? Which we probably can't do like this exactly, but we can do translation equals new vector 3 player translation XY and translation .z. Okay, so that's kind of what we want to do, and that will hopefully keep us at whatever Z distance. Let's make a little public float, like distance from player or something, right? We can set that to like 5 or something by default. Not that we can read defaults at the moment, but we can set it to 5, and then we'll basically we can just do that, I guess. Although maybe we do want to set that up somewhere else. Maybe like on create, we just want to take translation equals new vector 3 translation .xy and then distance from player or something like that, right? What's with this vector 3? Is that not a class? Oh, well, yeah, I don't think it is. No, it is. What's your problem? Oh, well, I guess we don't have that constructor. So this is kind of fun. We're getting into like some gameplay-esque programming now. So x equals xy x, y, z equals z. Where's our camera class? Yeah, that's pretty good. So yeah, so there's 2 ways to do that. I kind of want to do it this way, just so that we can do that, but that'll be like the next step. First, let's make it so that this works, right? So if we go back into the engine, let's go into the scene class. Actually, if we just look at script glue for a minute, I mean, we probably, okay, so let's actually start at the beginning maybe. And that would be better. So find entity by name is going to be a function inside the entity class, so that we can just call it like that. And it's going to return an entity. The first entity with that specific name, basically. And to do that, it's going to have to return internal calls. So it's going to have to go into the internal calls, call find entity by name. We'll add it up here next to this guy. I'm sick of typing that. It'll return, what's it gonna return? An entity, I guess, but really it's going to just return a ulong, because that's what an entity is, right? And then it has to take in a name. So that's the function. And then what we're gonna do with that is basically, that's gonna give us a ulong. That's gonna be the entity ID that we've looked up by name. And then we should be able to make an entity out of that. So entity has an internal constructor that takes that in. So really, it's just going to be new entity ID, like that. All right, and then we just have to implement this. So to implement that, let's go into our script glue. We'll come down in here. So entity has component, entity find entity by name. Is this our first time trying to take a string in? I think so, but basically we're going to take in a mono string. It's going to be a pointer. So we actually did a test of this, I think, a while ago. Might be good to dig this up, just to make sure I'm doing it correctly as well. So if we look at the GitHub for this project, inside the scripting branch, if we look at the commits, I think we did like initial C# script engine work, maybe added internal calls or something. But if we just take a look at that commit quickly, I think one of the tests we did, native log, right? Internal calls native log, that took in a C# string, right? You can see it here. So this is also why we kind of set that up initially, just so that we can refer back to the code, even though we deleted it. So if we go down to what on earth that function is, so what is it? It's called internal calls native log. So if we just search for native log down here, you can see this is the C++ code, and it just takes in a monostring, and then we can just do monostring to UTF-8, and then we copy those characters into this std string, and then we can free that, right? So we have kind of the idea of how to do this, so we can grab that, paste it here, and then we've got that name. We'll call it name, not string. We can get that C string out of there, and then pop that into an actual C++ string, and then we can free the C string, and then we can do whatever we want with it, basically. I mean, we could use it as a char pointer, but depending on how we use this, I mean, we'll probably make it a string anyway. It doesn't really matter though. We could definitely use it as a char pointer here, because we don't really need to construct a string out of it. We'll see. But we'll get the scene, and then we'll do, this is get entity by UUID, but we'll do find entity by name, right? Yeah, I think I will do this. I might as well just do this the faster way, right? So what we can do is, where we have get entity by UUID, let's also do find entity by name, except instead of taking in an std string, let's take in a string view, because that's going to let us just take in that char pointer if we want to. So let's create that implementation. All right, and then the idea is we can just take this in, so we don't need to do this. Oh, but this is its own thing anyway, right? So we probably have to free it after we do that. So we can do this. Yeah, okay. We can do name C string like that. Then we'll free it. I don't know why we have this assert here. Let's get rid of that. Because I'm guessing, like, depending on how we implement this, this might not even be valid. So we might, like, if not entity, we might just return... That's going to generate one, isn't it? So we'll return 0. Oh, well, actually, we're just trying to return the UUID. Because that's not going to be 0. Okay, so... Let's just return entity get UUID. That's basically how the function is going to work, right? We're just going to return the UUID of the entity if we find it. Otherwise, we'll return 0. If we try and get the UUID of an invalid entity, that's going to crash, obviously. That's why I'm checking it here. And that's obviously going to return 0, which is like an invalid entity if it doesn't actually find an entity. Now we have a choice here. What we could do is inside Sandbox, since this entity function here returns an entity, we're at the moment we're returning that potentially. If you type in a name here that it doesn't find an entity with that name, you're getting this. I would probably say that that's not the best idea. Potentially, you might want to instead say that if entity ID is 0, let's just return null. Right? Otherwise, we'll return a valid entity, because that way you can check for if it's null or not. Now, I don't think Hazel 3D does it that way. I think what we do in Big Hazel is, I think we do actually return a new entity with 0, but then we actually have like a bool operator. I have no idea how to write that in C#, but we have like some kind of bool operator or whatever that will kind of let us, you know, check to see if ID is 0, and obviously it returns ID, you know, not equal to 0. Why does it not let me write ID? It's clearly a variable. Well, because I didn't write that correctly. But whatever on earth the bool operator is in C#, I'm not actually going to do this. I'm not looking it up. But basically, if you do that, then that means you can, like, for example, try and find the player and then just do if player, right? I mean, not that it's like a stretch to do if player doesn't equal null, and that might be better potentially. And also, if you try and, you know, access that, it will give you a null reference exception if it's null, which might be good, because you can just, I mean, it's not going to crash the engine because it's all inside a managed language, but it will print that out in the log, potentially, you know, break here if you've attached the debugger once we have a debugger. So Yeah. I think I probably will not do that here, for now at least. And what we'll do is from entity, we'll just return null like this if it's 0. I think that's fair. So back in Hazel, that's really all we need to do, right? I think that's all we need to do. So obviously that's kind of it for tying them together. We just need to make sure that we add that internal call, which we've already done. And now it's just up to us to implement the function find entity by name, right? So how's that going to work? Well, we basically need to iterate through like every single entity that we have and try and see if the name matches, right? And this is also why it's not a fantastic kind of thing to just use this function all the time. We don't really want to refer to entities by their name anyway. It's much better to look them up by ID, or also potentially just already have a reference to the ID, right? And you can do that by setting up. So what am I doing here? You can do that by just setting up some kind of public entity field that you then drag something in from the editor. That way it gets the UID directly. Could you store them as a map with the name as a key? Yeah, you definitely can, but I don't know if that's good, because again, like the amount of times you should use this in your code, especially in a performance intensive part, is not okay. So let's talk about find entity by name. There's several reasons why you don't want to use this, right? So if we talk about the cons of this, I mean, the pros are, I guess, that you can easily retrieve an entity by its name, right? But the cons are that, first of all, well, like, where do we even begin with this? Like, first of all, like, I mean, it's the name of an entity. So what about like name duplication, right? Like, for example, if I launch a missile, my character launches a missile, it's going to probably instantiate a prefab called missile, and I'm going to have a lot of these in the scene. So that becomes useless now to get it by its particular name. What if I have an enemy, right? And the enemy might be like, I don't know, some kind of tiger. I don't know why I thought of tiger, but let's just say it's a tiger, right? So then I want to, there might be several tigers there. So what on earth am I talking about? Find entity by name, like tiger. Like, which one's that going to get me? That might not be the one I'm looking for anyway, right? So I might need to get a list of them and then sort through them and do all of this kind of other garbage, right? My point is that names don't uniquely identify entities, and we kind of know that, right? So name duplication is a real kind of issue, right? Now, performance. Why is performance a problem? Well, of course, in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to loop through every entity in the scene and see if the name matches. That's obviously not good, right? Which is why you should never really do this in an on-update function if you can avoid it. Again, depending on the size of your scene, it's probably not big, but it's generally not a good idea, right? Now, could you cache it in a map? You could, but then the kind of performance overhead that comes with having to maintain that map is really annoying, because you shouldn't really be using this function that much anyway. What do I mean by performance overhead? Well, again, let's just go back to the missile kind of, example. Every time I launch a missile, I'm going to have to now add that new entity to the map. And every time that missile dies, I'm going to have to remove the entity from the map, right? And I'm going to have to keep doing that. And also, like, I don't even know what missile would map to, considering there's possibly 10 entities in the scene at once with that same name. So which UUID would it map to? It'd have to map to like a vector of UUIDs, basically. So that doesn't really make sense either. So there's a kind of a few things to consider here, but ultimately, again, it's a fine function to use. It's a very simple function, and it's just nice if you just need it quick and dirty. Just give me this entity, I don't care, right? And that's kind of what it's used for. So it's important to, I think, understand that as well. Dark Matter saying, the thing is, Hazel doesn't have a way to directly give references to other projects like Unity, drag and drop, at least I think. Give references to other, no, it definitely does. If you're talking about Big Hazel, we definitely have that. That's quite an important feature. And we will have that here soon as well. It's very easy to implement. And that's what I was talking about. Like, what you would do in a realistic scenario is, let's just say the player needs to know about the camera. What you could do is just make a public entity camera or something, right? You could even probably make it the class if you wanted to, but public entity camera. And then this is a public script field that would appear in the editor, and you can just simply take the entity from the hierarchy, or the camera from the hierarchy, the camera entity in the scene hierarchy, and drag it into that script field, right? So that works in Hazel, in Big Hazel, and that's how I would probably do something like this, right? But since that's not a thing yet here, and also we do want this function to be a thing because it's, as I mentioned, easier to use sometimes. You might want to do it that way. So therefore, let's implement it. So let's loop through everything. And how do we do that? So we can kind of look at how we used to do this for, like, you know, get primary camera entity, because that's an example of us looping through the whole scene to find the primary camera, right? Obviously, we're looping through all the camera components. Because entities don't really exist in a data structure. We just have data structures of components, right? So in other words, what we would do here is we would simply just go through all of the tag components that we have, right? Because that's what contains, you know, the name, essentially, which we refer to as a tag here. And then all we need to do is we need to get that tag component for that entity, right? TC maybe. And then basically just do tc.tag, check to see, what is that, a string, right? To check to see if it equals name, right? And if it does, then that's it. We can return an entity. You know, we'll create like an entity instance out of this. It doesn't really matter. This is just like a little stack object that just contains these two things. Otherwise, we'll just return that. So we're returning the first thing we find, just like the primary camera entity. And that's really it. Now, someone said earlier, why are we returning a ulong or like a UUID? Why not return an entity? And the problem with that is that obviously, like, this is C++ land and this is C# land, right? Let me just open that entity.cs class in this editor as well, because it's in the project anyway. The problem is that this entity instance here is a C# managed object that actually is just a wrapper over an ID, and that's it, right? Whereas the C++ version of an entity is completely different, and it's just these two things, right? So they're completely different worlds. So we always kind of refer to entities by their UUIDs, and then if we actually need, because like at the end of the day, right, that's what it is. An entity is just some arbitrary ID that then maps to other actual data that we might want to access for that entity. And then that's why if you just keep that concept in mind, you can just pass around that UID, which is just a 64-bit ID, right, everywhere. Okay, so getting back to work, back in scene. So that's really all we have to do. We just have to compare that tag with its name, see if it matches exactly, and if it does, then we just return it, and that's it. I think that this is a string view. I think that comparison should probably work. Let's just compile to double check. Yep, we're good. That's it, okay? So back in our game, which is this sandbox thing, let's get rid of this in player. Let's go back to the camera class. This should probably work. Let me just shift F7, compile that, good. Yeah, I mean, this might actually work. We just need to set this distance from player, but I think that's it. So this, obviously, we can't just assume to set it this way, right? Let's just do, if player doesn't equal null, we'll set the translation. Otherwise, just because we are interested in this now, let's just do like a little console write line. I don't think we have, yeah, we've only got C# style logging in here. We can't log to the editor console or anything. We don't have an editor console actually. Player is null, right? So just to make sure we actually find the player. So I'll build the C# binary. I'll run Hazel. I'll drink some water. Okay, and so now, if we look at camera, so camera, we gave it a distance from player field, which is this guy down here, right? So let's make it have like a distance of 5 or something, and then if we just hit play, we crash, which is cool. Now, we shouldn't have crashed because I should have protected the code that causes to crash, but apparently, well, we crashed because, well, we didn't crash, we asserted, but it's about to crash. And that's because we couldn't get an entity by this UUID. Now, it's a little bit difficult to see exactly what caused this, right? And we don't have C# debugging or anything. But we obviously tried to get translation of a particular entity, and that clearly failed. So let's go back here. Was it the camera? Can we not do this? Actually, we should be able to see if it's the... Oh no, it's invoke on update. Okay, so it's definitely not coming from on create. So it's probably this, right? But we're not using player anywhere else. Isn't that weird? And I definitely removed everything from here, right? I think so. So it's got to be something here. So I guess this isn't null, but then this doesn't work. Let's do not null. Actually, I can check the console just to make sure this didn't print. No, it didn't. So player on create definitely ran. Camera on create doesn't seem to have run. That's a bit weird. Oh no, it's just because we're printing that here. Whoops. Okay, let's build that. Let's try and rerun this. We'll debug this sucker. Vague Lobster saying, by the way, Cherno, if you load another scene after opening the editor, can you play the scene or does it show black screen? It does for me. Well, remind me to come back to that. Okay, so, and I should have saved my thing. Not a big deal, but let's set that to 5, Control S. Okay, play. So, yeah, so it thinks play is not null, and yet it probably crashes. So why? Why does that happen? I guess we could probably put a breakpoint in here just to see if this works even. And in script glue, and just to see what's up. Because it seems to be working, right? It should be returning null if the player, if it's 0. And we do have something called player actually, so technically speaking it should work. Okay, good, that's working. Let's see if the name C string is correct. Oh, it's empty. It's empty. Huh. Okay, well that doesn't mean it should crash. That's wrong though, because obviously we're calling it with player, right? Find entity by name player, string name, find entity by name. Weird. That's a bit weird. Because we... Oh, is it? Whoa. Nah, man. What have I done? Go away. I hate global hotkeys that just bring up some arbitrary overlay that I never have used or will use in my life. Yeah, what's wrong with this guy? So, I mean, it's definitely calling the right function. But it's just like, it's not marshalling it correctly or something. Huh, that's very weird. But also, this looks a bit weird. Like, this does not even look like the right object. Oh, is it really supposed to be a monostring pointer? Is that what we did? Maybe it's not a monostring pointer. No, it is a monostring pointer. Because this is the code that we tested. Right? And that was native log. And native log, whoops, was up here. And yeah, it was just string text. That is weird. I don't think I've ever seen that happen in Big Boy. That's funny, Peter. Yeah, that's a bit weird, isn't it? Something's going wrong here. Very weird. But anyway, what's even weirder is, again, this shouldn't be causing a crash, though. Because, like, we'll deal with the string marshalling in a minute, but also it should just be returning... It should be returning null. Because, clearly, name C-string is empty. It's just a null termination character, apparently. So if we try and find entity by name, nothing should match this, right? Yeah, so it's returning an invalid entity. And then we're checking to see if the entity is invalid and returning 0, which is correct, right? So after this, we should be going into here, seeing that this is 0 and returning null, and yet it's not returning null. So something is really falling apart here. I mean, several things look like they're falling apart. Because this is wrong as well, this name. Well, somehow. Entity, find entity by name. What have I done? This is definitely you long. Find identity by name, string name. Weird. Really weird. Really weird. Huh. Mono errors in the console. Nope. Nothing. No, these are just innocent. That looks fine. That looks fine. Huh. Yeah, in that case, the internal core signature is fine. Yeah, weird. The return types do match, basically. They match in terms of memory. But, like, we're not taking... Well, no, it's clearly working. Like, in terms of the binding to mono, that's 100% working. Because... like, we're obviously inside this function, right? So we've called it. It's just that this is just wrong, though. This monostring. It doesn't seem to be a monostring. That's very, very weird. I mean, we can try return, like... Have we ever done that before? I don't think so. Because, like, I mean, a UUID, it's almost a trivial class. Not quite a trivial class, but uint64... Like, we could change this to be a uint64t. I don't see how that would really change anything, because the underlying memory is identical. Unless it actually cares somehow about types or whatever. Which it shouldn't. Oh, look. That's correct. Whoa. Okay, so let's go back to that. Ah, that's weird. Yeah, so that's wrong. And then if we make it a uint64t, then it's correct. Interesting. Because obviously we take in UUID here, right? And we pass in a ulong because that's what it is. Like, the bits are the same. It's just a uint64t. But somehow the return type messes up this whole thing, and yet it still calls that? Like, obviously it still calls this function, so the signature is fine. It's just because of the return type, the input name is wrong. Like, and again, this would make sense if they were different sizes, obviously, but they're not. Like, this is a uint64t, and a UUID is also 8 bytes big. So I'm very... Well, we could try do a little size of UUID equals size of uint64t, but like, we know that's going to be the same, right? Yeah, we're running, so that compiled. So very weird. Just make sure that this is actually working. Yeah, it is. So very weird. No padding. They're identical. Yeah, big boy Hazel never returns a UID apparently. Anyway, whatever. I don't really care. But that's just an interesting thing because obviously we can pass it in. But yeah, apparently mono just does not play well with that. Well, okay, cool. I guess everything works now. But that's very, very weird. Alright, and you can see just like that, the camera now follows the player. Oh, the player's so heavy I can't lift him up. There we go. It's going up. The gizmos activate because I'm hitting W. So I can go through the gizmos, which is a bit weird. I can just deselect the object though. Okay, cool. So there you go. Now the camera follows the player. And we also have this like distance from player variable, right? Inside the camera, which we can adjust, which we should be able to adjust as the as the thing runs. The reason why it's not actually adjusting live is because remember we made it so that we actually copy that parameter during the construction, right? So I'm actually going to get rid of that. I think that's silly. And we'll just set it in the on update. We're already playing that. And then that seems to have broken stuff. What did I do? What else did I do? Oh, player is not null. Okay, let's get rid of this. But what the heck? Why is that not working now? Oh, it is now. That's weird. I don't know what was wrong there. But now we can actually go down here into camera and set that distance from player, as you can see, while we're actually running, right? So this is useful because we can just be like, what's a good distance? 6.5, right? And then we can test it out without having to hit stop and go back. We can just click the camera and be like, maybe 5.5, you know, we can adjust it while it's running, which is really cool. So yeah, and we can kind of see the benefit of scripting as well, right? Because it's so much easier to deal with it this way. Like, obviously, like, once we add the reloading assemblies, that's going to make it way more useful than here, because we could obviously have a variable from C++ here as well. But yeah, pretty cool stuff. Okay, so let's maybe take a look at how on earth we would actually get the C# class, right? So how does that work? How does this work? So basically what we need to do, this is where it becomes a little bit tricky. We've made this work, and I'm pretty happy with that, because now we can arbitrarily look up any entity by name. So now we've, for the first time, entities in Hazel 2D, can actually like interact with each other, right? Because before this, there was no way for an entity to like get data or set data to another entity, but now we can do that, which is pretty cool. But what we are going to move on to now is hopefully being able to actually retrieve the script class. Now, why would we want this? Well, maybe, like, okay, at the current kind of way that things are, it's completely useless because our script classes are just basically entity classes, right? There's nothing really here. Yeah, but what we could do if we did have access to that is, for example, let's think of an example. Well, I don't know, even something as simple as like, let's make it so that when I hit Q and E, maybe, I zoom in and out. Okay, that's not a bad thing to do. So how do we zoom in and out? Well, we have to set this distance from player thing, right? So we have to, because if we modify that, that will obviously modify the camera's like position, right? And of course we could just set the camera's transform and do whatever, but for this example, let's just pretend we're trying to modify this variable. So if we do Q and E like this, then basically what we want to do is, let's maybe do this here. And I'm doing this in onUpdate. You can obviously do this in onCreate and then not have to call this function every frame. But for now, we're just doing it this way. So what I need to do for that is I need to somehow get the camera instance so that I can basically do camera.distance from player. You know, for Q, let's make that go further away. So we'll increase it, right? We'll plus equals like, I don't know, speed times time step, sure. Even though speed is a bit weird, but whatever. And then for E, we'll subtract it, right? So this is what we need to do. So in other words, we can't have an entity camera. Yeah, we can't quite do this because we need distance from player, which is clearly something that exists on the in the actual camera class. So for this to work, we need to be able to maybe get the camera entity, and then if camera doesn't equal null, then we can call camera.as camera to cast it kind of to, you know, that right type. And then if that's the case, and again, we'll clean up this code later, but if that's the case, we can actually modify that distance from player, right? So that's kind of what we're going to hopefully get working here today. So how does this work? Well, first of all, to get this camera, right? It's not quite as simple as getting an entity. Because remember, what an entity is ultimately is it's just a shell that contains an ID and then uses that ID to like puppeteer all these strings and actually do work, right? Whereas this class is a specific instance of this script that's running. And we're interested in this specific instance. So the way that we can kind of get that ultimately is we need to find out, and we do this from an entity, right? So I don't know why I'm in here. Let's go back to the script. If we're in here, once we have the entity, we need to do .as and then camera. So the idea is basically, and I'm gonna probably mess up the syntax here. Will be T as T. I never remember where T is gonna be an entity and probably new, whatever. I've just copied kind of this. I always mess up generics or whatever in C#. But basically what this needs to do is it needs to grab the UUID, obviously, right? And then call into, this current ID, right? And then call into C++ land to be like, hey, I have this entity ID. Please give me like the mono object or whatever that I need. I think we do it a bit differently in Big Hazel, actually. So let me just double check because I don't want to get this wrong. Yeah, so basically what we need to do is we just need to pass in, let's do internal calls, maybe get a script instance or something, and then for a given, let's do it this way, and we'll do that for a given ID, right? And so what that's gonna do, that's gonna give us an object back because it'll be a mono object. And then we'll return that. Beautiful, thank you, AI, or whatever. So internal calls get script instance. Let's go ahead and implement that. So, I mean, we've kind of messed this up a bit, but, and this is kind of just like a, yeah, we'll just call this get script instance. We'll pass in that entity ID, because obviously each entity is going to have its own script instance, and then we'll get back an object. All right, and then from the native side of things, it's actually pretty simple. We just need to, maybe I'll do this near the top, but we just basically need to grab the entity ID like this, get, what is it called? What do we call it? Get script instance. And this is going to return an object. And then basically the idea, sorry, a mono object. And basically the idea with this is that if we take a look at our actual script engine, we obviously have like a map of these things, right? We have a map of UUID to script instance, and the script instance within itself, guess what it has? It has a mono object, right? So let's add a new function here so that we can actually retrieve this, because at the moment we can't. Let's do a little get mono object. I might just call it managed object or something. And then we'll just return instance like that. And then we just need access to kind of this thing, right? Which we can't exactly get from there. So we might have to add a little bit of API to this. So script engine, let's do static mono object, get managed instance. Could do entity, sure. And then ultimately that's just going to do return entity get UUID. Let's do, so that's the ID. We could just take in a UUID, obviously. I don't know if we should create an entity out of this. Let's make it just do a UUID. Do we always write this like that? Probably. That's the ID, and then we just need to do sdata script entities. No, what is it called? Okay, that is a pointer, and it's called entity instances. .find UUID. So I guess if that equals, I don't know if we should assert Probably not, right? Let's just, yeah. Like, let's assert, because I don't know if this should be necessarily allowed. Like, you shouldn't get to this part, probably, without having... Oh, whoa. Core critical. Assert. Without having verified that it's actually valid UUID, right? And if it's valid, it should be here, I guess. No, but then also, for this actually to be valid, it's going to have to have a script as well. It's not just about whether or not the entity is valid. Because, for example, we could use our find entity by name. We could ask for, like, I don't know, some static mesh that doesn't even have a script component. And of course, that's a valid entity in the scene, but it's not a valid script object because it doesn't have a script instance at all. So I don't know, we'll come back to this maybe. But ultimately, if that does exist, then we can just do @UUID. And that's gonna give us our script instance thing, and then we can do get managed object, and that ultimately is what we return, okay? So it's actually pretty simple. That's the get managed instance class, and then over here we just need to basically call get managed instance with the entity ID, and that's kind of it. It's like a one-line thing. We probably should verify some state here as well, but that's, yeah, that's basically it. And then obviously when we come back here, we have this thing. We can cast it to T. Hopefully it'll be the same type. If it's not, then that's all messed up. And of course we can abuse this as much as we want. Like we might say that it's a player, but that might not be the case. So you have to be careful here, I guess. But yeah, let's try and build this assembly. That's all good. And then we'll get some exception if it's the wrong type. But yeah, let's run this and see what's up. Are we even, yeah, we're doing something, right? Oh. All right, so something's out of sync. Can't resolve it to internal call to get script instance. Okay, so get script instance in script glue. I think I just forgot to add this. Yeah, I did. What have we been testing? Oh, Q&E. Yeah, it works. Check that out. Okay, so we can zoom in and out now. We can actually click on camera and then watch this increase and decrease as I hit Q&E. We can still move, obviously. Everything still works, but now we can zoom in and out, and we're doing that by basically find entity by name camera, and then yeah, just getting that camera class instance. So that is how it works. I am responding to chat. I'm just trying to get work done as well. Okay, so yeah, that's it. I'm gonna leave this example here. The speed's a bit soft here. Like maybe let's just do like ×2 or something. Whoops. We'll restart this. I think either next time or like sometime soon at least. Yeah, so there's Q&E, a bit faster now because we did ×2. Then we can still kind of, you know, run around and we get this, which is pretty cool. And then we can zoom out as well if we want to. And the camera obviously follows the player, and we did that entirely through scripting, just by retrieving the object by name, the entity by name. Let's go back to the camera. So what I want to do as well, just as a little optimization, is I'll call on create. So I'll add that function in, and then what I want to do is basically have like a little private entity and player, right? Which we could get the actual player object if we wanted to. Obviously, now that functionality exists, and we'll just do player equals. Well, basically what we were doing here, right? So find entity player, but now it's just this. And then here we can check to see if it's not null. And then if it's not null, we can set it like that, okay? And then obviously now we can actually do this if we want to. you know, from here or wherever, and actually store like that instance there, which is great. But we don't need to for this because obviously we're just trying to set translation. So that should also work. Let me just verify that works, and we're basically done for today. Veg lobster, I want to, yeah, that does work. I want to get back to your problem. So what were you saying? Let me just scroll up in chat. If you load another scene after opening the editor, can you play the scene? Or does it show blank screen? Okay, so apparently you're saying if I open up like the pink cube and I hit play. Ah, blank screen. Okay, you're right. Huh. Wonder what the problem could be. This doesn't even have scripting. Weird. Yeah, because this is fine. If I go back to this, does it work? No. Oh, I think I know why. Yep. It's because we removed that code last time. So, in editor layer, we had some code where whenever we opened a scene, we basically set the viewport resize for that scene so that it would get a valid size. I kind of removed that code, but unfortunately what it does is basically causes that bug, right? So the problem is that basically you can see if I resize it, it works. It's just that it doesn't have a size, unfortunately. Now, the thing that sets the thing that does on viewport resize, let's take a look at that, is basically it's dependent on whether or not the viewport size that we store has changed, I think, right? So if the frame buffer spec doesn't match this, then it causes us to resize. I think what we can do is probably just do, because I like a more reactive approach to this, to be completely honest. We could just say that if viewport width is equal to width and viewport height is equal to height, then let's just return. Otherwise, we can actually just flat out set this every frame like that, right? And the reason why I like doing this is because it means that we don't need some weird checks here ever. It's just that, like, for everything that actually is aware of its own size, or like, it should handle that, and then you can just call into it like that, right? Maybe I don't know if on viewport resize is a good function name for that, because that implies that a resize event has actually happened. But either way, if you do that, that does eliminate the need for everything, and of course it will never not work, because there's not like a list of places where you have to call that function. Since you're the one calling it every frame, and then it's just not doing the work if it doesn't need to, it's never going to miss a notification, right? So this is going to work, and then if I go into pink cube, that's going to work as well, right? So I'm going to leave it at that, but of course you want to have this code in here so that you're not actually doing this every frame, because you don't want to. And by the way, it's exactly this, like, this is also a check that we're doing every frame, clearly, right? So it's not really any different. It's just we've put it into its own kind of, we're separating the systems a little bit and not keeping them as coupled, which is always good anyway. Is that it for like the bugs and stuff? I don't know if we've got anything else, but I'm going to go ahead and commit this. We take a look at our changes today. Yeah, so find entity by name we added, as well as fixing this thing. Yeah, this stuff is good. Yep. I'll update the scene as well. These guys. That editor layer change. The stuff inside sandbox project. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I guess to retrieve script class instance. Actually, if I've done that though, and that obviously is going to work always, I can get rid of the comments I had. So that's gone, and that's gone. What was that? Also fixed. That's kind of it, right? Yeah. Cool. That's it. Push. So that's on the scripting branch over on GitHub. How much more time and work will you be putting into scripting? Can you elaborate on the plan for Hazel in the upcoming weeks? Sure. So this is where we're at. So getting script component class in C#. That's kind of what we've done. So it's more like script class instance in C#, and that is done. The huge feature, as far as I'm concerned, is being able to reload C# assemblies, which I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea how to do. I've done it once before, like a few years ago, but I remember it was very much like trial and error. So that's gonna require this. It's a bit finicky. So that's gonna take a while, I think. Well, hopefully one episode, but like you do it with pain. Yeah, Peter knows what I'm talking about. So I don't know, maybe maybe Peter's going to be kind enough to provide me with like a nice outline of exactly what to do, so I can just like read from a script. Basically, that would be ideal. But otherwise, it's going to be a lot of stabbing to get it to work properly. But aside from that, like everything else is minor, right? There are some performance improvements we could do. There is obviously like, I mean, I guess like a huge feature potentially is debugging. So in Hazel, in Big Boy Hazel, we actually have a Visual Studio extension that Peter made. We actually have like a Visual Studio extension. Do I have it here? Yeah, I do. Can I zoom in? I'm not running my thing. We have this like Visual Studio extension, right? And you can see we have a little button. Whoa, thanks for zooming out. We have a little button here that lets us attach to Hazelnut. And that will actually like hook up your C# code to the Mono runtime, and you can place breakpoints. You can inspect variables, including ones that go into C++ land. So in other words, you can like look at the translation of something, even though that requires going into C++. That's fine. It'll evaluate all those expressions. You'll get exceptions popping up here, so that you can debug them. It's great. So that, but it's a little bit of a task, obviously, to get that to work. I mean, to be completely honest, maybe Peter can eventually help us out with that, because the extension, maybe we could even make the extension work with Hazel 2D and Hazel 3D, right? That's possible. In which case, we wouldn't need to even write the extension as part of this series. It would just be, and I think it's open source anyway, so you guys can look at it. But yeah, it's just going to be adding some extra stuff to our Mono runtime, basically. So that's also like a potential feature. Well, in that case, if it doesn't even require the extension, then I think debugging is definitely a feature we should do, probably after that, right? But basically, this is the outline. And there's a bunch of minor features, obviously. Like, we're still adding features and doing various things inside Big Boy Hazel as well, right? Hi, I'm thinking about using Visual Assist extension, but I'm not sure if the personal version would work on multiple machines under the same account or requires a corporate one. I don't even know the answer to that. Well, I definitely don't have the corporate one. And I use it on my laptop and my desktop. So, on 2 computers. So, I think it should work on at least 2 computers. Cool. Okay. Well, anyway, that's the outline. Does anyone else have any questions? Because if not, I'm gonna go home to my family. Yeah, no worries. Glad you guys enjoyed the stream. I've heard something about the GTA 6 leaks, but I haven't seen them myself yet. I might take a look at them at some point. Excited for Ludum Dare? Kind of. Well, no, I'm definitely excited for Ludum Dare, but there's a lot of work I need to do until then. Because I haven't really done any programming in the last week because I've been busy doing like business things and videos and stuff. Yeah. Is the optimization series on Patreon? I'd like to learn more about it. I'm not sure what you mean by optimization series. I don't have an optimization series. I enjoyed 5 seconds from the stream. You're welcome. When will we do projects? What does that even mean? You mean making stuff in Hazel? Or in Hazel 2D? Wasn't there an optimization October? Oh yeah, that's still going. I don't remember what I did last optimization October. I will put up a lot of videos on on optimization, including stuff like multi-threading, pretty soon. Because like there's already a lot of behind the scenes work that we've done for that. Like multi-threading works in the Hazel 3D runtime. In fact, the game that we ship for this Ludum Dare will probably be using the multi-threaded runtime. Which will be good because it should perform a lot better for a lot of people. And we've got some other things. I've just been like, to be honest, I've been busy making videos that aren't really Hazel related, and then also like doing programming basically for Hazel. So there's a lot of videos. There's like a lot of work has happened on Hazel, that I just have not made videos about. So I'll probably like next month or the month after even, I'll probably be making a lot of Hazel related videos. So don't worry, the work is happening, which is why I kind of wanted to make like a newsletter or something that you guys can subscribe to, like a weekly newsletter where I can just be like, this is, this is the stuff that the Hazel team has been working on. We didn't have time to make a devlog or a video or whatever, but this is what we're working on and this is the progress, and here are some screenshots and stuff. But I don't know, maybe I'll get around to making that sometime. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video and the stream and the Game Engine series. If you want to support it, patreon.com/thecherno is the best place to support the Game Engine series and Hazel, and you'll get access to Big Boy Hazel. And you'll be supporting obviously everything we do here. So thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.